Well, we're finally going to be able to put the Seattle Seahawks game, the loss, in the rearview mirror. And hey, you get 17 opportunities. Right now, the Lions are 1-1. And how, TJ, let's just start here. How do they rebound? How do they come out against Atlanta? We're going to talk about the injury report, guys that are going to be available, possibly not available. We're recording this on Thursday, so we do have Wednesday's injury report. But just quick, how do they bounce back from the Seattle loss, turn the page, and try and get a win against Atlanta?
I think you got to focus on the little things, the small details. And offensively speaking, that's the turnovers, right? I know we talked about last week, 3 of them. First one, whatever, didn't change the game. It was the end of the first half. Didn't really matter. But the other 2 were killers, right? They just were. That's if showing up on Monday all throughout the week, I'm sure the coaches have made a point of emphasis. Guys, we've got to take care of the football. When we were winning games last year, the last 10 games, they were about plus 17 in the turnover department. So far right now, I think they're -2 throughout the season. Just not a good statistic. So this team, I know that last year coach said, hey, we've got a very small room, for error. We cannot afford to make mistakes. I think that margin has gotten a little bit bigger this year, but I don't care who you're playing, John. If you turn the ball over that many times in a game, it's going to be hard to win. So that for me is the first key. Take care of the damn football and defense. Find a way to get it out. Right. Find a way to punch at the ball. Find a way to get your hand on it. Find a way to, cause a spark play. We didn't really see that last week in Seattle. We saw a lot of missed tackles, but one thing I hope that they've been working on this week is getting after that ball. Bijan and Algier, these are tough runners, but you watch the tape a little bit. There's going to be some opportunities. Got to take advantage of those. So now let's bring up the injury report, because on Wednesdays, here's the guys that did not play. And we're not even going to talk about Pascal's on IR. CJ's on IR, so that they don't get involved in the the injury report. Taylor Decker did not practice. Kirby Joseph did not practice. David Montgomery, Emmanuel Mosley, Amon-Ra St. Brown did not practice. Hal Vaitai didn't practice. Josh Reynolds was a limited practice, and then Antoine Green and Frank Ragnow full practice. No determination on whether or not they are doubtful, likely, or out for the game. But when you look at the guys that didn't practice, again, doesn't mean that they won't play, but you're talking about some impactful players that were not on the practice field on Wednesday. Of those guys, who do you think would be the most impactful if they don't play? Out of those guys you listed, probably Amon-Ra St. Brown. I know that I saw him early in the game getting taped up on the sideline.
Yeah, with his toe.
He was cramping a little bit. He did come back and finish the game. That's always a positive anytime you're able to do that. But yeah, his absence, I think, would be detrimental to what this offense does. And look, I think you can even make an argument for, Decker. Last week, when we recorded this podcast last Thursday, I said, I'm not really concerned about him. Then we get to Saturday, and it's like, oh, man, I guess I was wrong. I'll try to reverse that jinx. I'm concerned about everybody. Hopefully that means they play. But, yeah, Amon-Ra would, I think, definitely be the toughest void to fill, especially with all the other guys you're missing.
Well, so let me look at it a different way. If David Montgomery is unable to go, which I think he's probably more unlikely to go than Amon-Ra, then you're looking at Jahmyr Gibbs as being your lead back. I'm not sure he's going to be that successful in between the tackles. Jared Goff has shown he's been really good at a lot of different things this year, save that one interception in pick 6. But what he excels at is the play action pass.
Yeah.
If you can't sell the play action pass, then I'm not sure whether or not Amon-Ra's there. If your number one target, is whoever it ends up being, if it's Josh Reynolds, that's where I would make the argument that it may be more Montgomery's absence. Now, you can get the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs in a number of different ways. You can attack the edges, and they're going to have to. 14 touches last week is not enough for a guy that was picked as high as he was. You would believe that he would be a much more a part of the game plan, and that they would get the ball in his hands a number of different ways and more than they have. I think by default they're going to have to. But without Montgomery there, I think it takes away one of the best weapons that the Lions have, and that's the play action pass.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to argue. I do think that this game is going to be, and we heard it last week. We heard that Gibbs was going to be more involved, and then you get in the game and you're like, okay, when?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, he did get more touches than week one, but
yeah, I mean,
what was the impact?
Yeah, right. And that's where I think, and I was wondering this, about this yesterday. Is this a game, do you think the coaches try to showcase him a little bit more just based off what's on the other side? When you look at Bijan Robinson, I mean, I know that there's not really there's got to be a part of them that's like, we want to prove we made the right pick. Everybody has seen what Bijan has done the first couple of weeks, and he's been a dynamic player and an explosive player for the Atlanta Falcons.
He was on the board when the Lions were on the clock.
That's what I'm saying. And is this the type of game where, if you're the coaching staff, you want to kind of prove that you made the right decision by showcasing Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit more? And look, I don't disagree with you when you say, is Gibbs, primed to handle a heavy workload? Is he a guy that you can run in between the tackles? I think you kind of have to be, John. I mean, he was,
you're stating obvious.
Right, but with where they took him, in the draft, you can't say, oh, this is just a guy we use on gadget plays or try to get to the edge or the screen. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to be a complete running back, and I think he can be. I think that he's just got to learn, and we hit this a little bit, earlier the week, but he's got to learn when to get north and south, right? There's still a few too many times he's trying to outrun guys, and, you're just going to run out of room eventually with the sideline. You got to find a way to get north and south, and he did that against Kansas City. We didn't really see that against Seattle as much. And maybe that was kind of by design. When Montgomery went out, it was like, okay, kind of limit the hits you're going to take. And, if nothing's there, just get down, get out of bounds. We can't afford to lose you either. But I think he's going to be a guy that they're going to try to highlight a little bit this week, just to kind of say, all right, everybody take a deep breath, right? Because there's already been rumblings about, oh man, Bijan looks like the guy, right? Bijan looks like, the stud out of this group. If you're the Lions, I think you try to showcase that to say, all right, not so fast, right? We got a guy over here ourselves, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a much heavier workload this week.
Well, yeah, I think by default he's going to have to because are you going to give it to Bam Knight? That's not going to be your guy coming off the practice squad to be your number one back.
And Bam Knight was a guy last year that played a lot for the Jets, especially in the second half of the season. And just reading some stats, he was up there in the top 5 when it came to broken tackles or forcing missed tackles, I should say. And look, I don't look at him as being a guy that's going to come in and take over as the number one bell cow, but do I feel a little bit more comfortable, with the unknown of him rather than what we saw with a guy like Craig Reynolds we saw last week that have very minimal impact?
Yeah.
At this point, it's kind of like, hell, give me some Bam Knight. Give him, 5, 6, 7 carries, in the first quarter and see if he can provide a spark. We saw it last year when there were injury concerns. The guy that stepped up last year was Justin Jackson. Nobody really knew anything about Justin Jackson, what he was going to provide, but he brought a spark to this offense. Maybe Bam Knight can do the same thing.
So when you talk about Jahmyr Gibbs and the fact that he should be able to be a guy that can run in between the tackles, I think when you draft a guy number 12 at the running back position, he definitely, that's how it needs to be a part of the game plan, that he can attack, a quick hitter over top of the guard.
Yeah.
Like it absolutely has to, especially when, we saw the excitement that they had when they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. Like that whole film that they released after, we saw the nut shot that Dan Campbell took from Brad Holmes because Brad Holmes was so excited. They're high-fiving, they're jumping around. If you're that excited about a guy, then why does he only have 23 touches in the first 2 games? Like, why is there this ramp up to try and get him up to speed? Should they have gotten him more reps in the preseason so that you're not, hey, we're going to give you 9 reps in the first game, we're going to give you 14 reps in the second game. Maybe by the third game you're ready for a bigger workload. This is going to be a game where Jared Goff needs to go out and show why he deserves that extension, why he deserves to be talked about as a top 10 quarterback in this league.
Yeah.
Because you might not have your number 1 wide receiver, you might not have your number 1 back, but you're going to have an offensive line that's still going to be able to protect you, that you should be able to go out and do something with. But for Ben Jansen, we heard about all of the creative ways that they're going to use Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, I haven't seen him line up anywhere where I didn't already expect him to line up. I didn't see him get the ball in his hands, like the whole shuffle pass to Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, that's the creativity that I think we have come to expect. I don't need to see it every play, but I want to see some type of creativity in how you're going to get Jahmyr Gibbs the ball where he has the advantage, where he's in space and he can make some guys miss.
Yeah, and I'm with you. And I think a lot of it still falls on Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, it comes to a reliability issue. And I'm not saying he has been a guy that the coaches don't trust or anything, but you got to start taking advantage. If you're only getting, the 7, 8, 9 carries a game, you better make them count, right? Because that gives the coaches trust to say, all right, now let's open it up a little bit. Now we can trust this guy. Let's get going. Hopefully this is the week. I know we said it. I felt like it was going to be last week. For whatever reason, it wasn't. But hopefully this is the week where we come out of here Sunday afternoon saying, all right, we know what we got with Jahmyr Gibbs, right? We see it. And if he can be a guy, a guy that I hope that he can compare to eventually is a guy like Aaron Jones. I mean, Aaron Jones for Green Bay is not a big guy. He's about 5'9", maybe 200 pounds. He runs between the tackles. He runs. He's a lightning bolt out of the backfield. He gets downfield in a hurry. I mean, he's a good receiving back. If Jahmyr Gibbs can turn into a guy like that can just provide you a home run play once a game, or at least a home run threat, I think we're all going to be happy about that. And I like what you said about Jared Goff. And I just want to hit really quick. Going back and rewatching that Seattle game, I did not feel like Jared Goff cost them the game by any means.
Right.
But there were a handful of plays
he could have won
that he's got to make. There were a handful of plays early in the game, the first 4th down. They went for it. He was kind of honing in on Sam Laporta. He kind of threw it into tight coverage. It got knocked away. Big play in the game, right? You're taking points off the board. I think it was Josh Reynolds was just kind of running a little over route over the middle of the field with nobody within 15 yards. And it's like, okay, Jared, like, you want to be that guy, got to start making these plays, right? Late in the game, I think we were a little bit hard on Campbell when it came to the late game management about trying to get the touchdown, playing for the field goal, because I go back and I watch it, and there were opportunities that the Lions would have had to win that game if they would have executed. One of them being after they pick up the couple first downs early, they take a shot at the sticks to Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's got a first down probably inside the 15-yard line. Goff throws it at his feet. Yeah. And it's like, okay, that kind of changes what you're doing as a coach. And then they get to the 3rd down and 3rd and 7, you throw a 3-yard pass, right? So those are just the things. And I'm not trying to say I think Jared Goff played bad. He didn't. But if you want to put yourself into that conversation about a guy that, hey, are we going to extend this guy? Is this a guy we want to give $50 million to? Is this a guy that we think is a top 5, top 10 quarterback in the league?
He could have gone and won.
You got to start making those plays. And that's something that I'd like to see. I'd like to see Jared at least start making at least 1 or 2 off script, kind of, not just playing street ball, but get off your first read, right? Get off the second. Just find a guy and go, man, because it seems like if the first read, second read's not there, it's kind of panic time. Just go out there, let it loose, and play fun, and find a way to make those big plays in those key situations. There was a couple last week where I felt like that game would have been different if you would have made a couple of those. Yeah,
and it's the pre-snap look, and I think he does a good job with his eyes of looking away. But when you get a pre-snap look and he knows, all right, Amon-Ra is the guy I'm coming to, or Josh Reynolds is the guy I'm coming to, he can look away, and then all of a sudden when he comes back, you could tell that he's predetermined. I'm going to Amon-Ra St. Brown, or I'm going to Sam Laporta. Even if I'm not looking at him right away, I'm trying to look off the safety, and you need good quarterbacks to do that. But when you go back and it's not there, you got to be able to pull the trigger and say, okay, I'm going to go then to my 3rd read. To your point, you've got to be able to get further down the progression. Now, I think the biggest key to victory for the Lions is the way that the defensive line plays. And everybody's all up in arms about getting after the quarterback. And yes, you've got to be able to put more pressure on the quarterback. But in this game, Desmond Ridder is not a guy that I believe is going to go and beat you in the pass game. If he does, then this team isn't at all as good as we thought they would be, even without CJ.
Yeah.
In the secondary.
There would be major concerns at that.
You've got other guys that can fill the void, maybe not to his level or with his leadership qualities, but you got Brian Branch. You've got other guys that can fill in Tracy Walker. Hey, insert Tracy Walker. He was the starter last year. He was a captain last year, so he should be able to go in there and perform. The big issue for me is you've got to find a way to stop the run game. You've got to find a way to stop Bijan Robinson. That is the Atlanta Falcons offense.
Yeah.
And so
they've been good at that. They've been good at that throughout the first 2 weeks. They have only allowing about 85 yards on the ground throughout 2 games. They've been good. I mean, that has not been a concern.
They haven't had this test, though.
This is going to be a different beast, though. You're absolutely right. And that's why I say, look, you got to stop the run. I wonder if if this is, kind of the week where we get a little bit more, maybe they get Isaiah Buggs going.
Yeah.
Maybe we see Broderick Martin for the first time. I mean, he's a guy that, I knew he had his flash plays in training camp. He's been a healthy scratch the first couple of weeks, but he's a big guy, right? If that can, because I look at just watching the tape last week, this defensive line was worn out by the time the fourth quarter and overtime came around. I mean, these guys were playing a ton of snaps. They took a ton of body blows. It was worn out. I'd love to see them get a fresh look in there. Whether it be Martin, whether it be Buggs, be back. Buggs is a guy that's obviously going to have a chip on his shoulder, being a healthy scratch the first couple weeks. But to add on to your point, stopping the run, I think my biggest thing is you got to find a way to start fast. And I think against teams like this, you got to find a way to try to get up 2 scores.
Yeah.
Because that takes that. If you're up 7, if you're up 3, the other team's not changing what they're doing. Yeah. If you're down, if you're up 10 or if you're up 14, coaches start to look at that a little bit and maybe hit the little panic button and say, okay, we kind of got to get out of this. We can't keep running the ball, especially if it's not working. And that's where, I hate to keep going back to last week, but that was, I think the biggest issue that the Lions had was they had 3 or 4 chances where they're up 7 points and they couldn't find a way to go get that other score, to go up 2 scores, to take Seattle out of that run game, to take them out of that play action game. If you can find a way to do that against this Atlanta team, like you said, and put it in Desmond Ritter's hands, I like our chances. Yeah. So, but stopping the run, try to find a way to start fast, get up a couple scores, put the pressure on Atlanta. Don't allow them to just run the ball 50 times a game like they want to, are going to be huge keys for me.
Yep. Well, there you have it. Those are the keys to victory for the Detroit Lions this week. TJ, I know we're going to get a chance to hear you during the game on the sidelines in the pregame, postgame with Coach Campbell. So we'll look forward to hearing that, and we'll talk to you early next week. Hopefully we're talking about a 2-1 Detroit Lions team.
I hope so.
Because we're going back to your Stop McGraw. It's a short week.
I'm not
Thursday night.
A lot of talk this week has been, where's your panic meter at, right? I mean, there's been no panic. I mean, you look at the big picture and you say, hey, we're 1-1, right? The only thing not achievable now is an undefeated season. All right, you still got 15
didn't really
games.
think that was a possibility.
Right. And when you say, okay, that we didn't think that was a possibility, we're still okay, right? But this is a game. Hey, you want to show us you're different. You want to show us that, you're more like the team that finished last year than the team that started. This is a game you got to take care of.
Sense of urgency. We'll talk to you next week on Necessary Roughness.